Hey guys, tonight we're traveling to the open steppe, where the wind never really stops moving, and the sky feels so wide you wonder if it ever had a ceiling. The ground is soft with grass and dry roots. The horizon flickers with distant horses, and the silence is full of bird calls and the occasional impatient sheep. We're visiting the day-to-day world of Mongol herding women. Yes, the ones who kept the entire empire running, while the men were off conquering everything in sight. But don't be fooled by the romance of endless freedom. Between the chores, the wind burn, and the eternal parade of goats with boundary issues, you probably wouldn't last a day. Still, tonight, you don't have to survive it. You just get to drift through it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing the global bedtime parade. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun, though technically, the stars are still out, and a faint ribbon of silver glows low on the eastern edge of the sky. The air in your gear, that round felt tent you call home, is cool and faintly smoky from last night's embers. You're wrapped tightly in layers of wool blankets and pressed against a sheepskin mattress that's seen better centuries. Outside, a dog lets out one sleepy bark. Another answers with a sigh. And you know without really knowing that a horse just shook its mane on the far side of the hill. You sit up slowly, careful not to wake the smallest children beside you. The floor creaks, not because it's wood, but because of the tightly packed reeds under the wool carpets. Everything smells like campfire, goat, and a hint of yesterday's butter tea. Your day begins with a breath. As the first to rise, because of course you are, you crawl toward the door flap, careful not to stub your toe on the big brass kettle that lives near the hearth. You untie the leather loop and peel back the felt flap to reveal a world washed in dawn. The steppe stretches endlessly, glowing faintly with dew. Your herd is still close shapes moving slowly in the morning mist, tails flicking lazily. You step out, boots soft in the grass. The air is crisp and dry, and you can hear the gentle clinking of bells. Your family has tied to the necks of a few older goats for tracking purposes. It sounds oddly like wind chimes. Your breath comes out in soft clouds. The horizon looks like it was painted by someone half asleep. The first job of the day: fetch water. There's a well nearby, thankfully not frozen, and the cold handle bites your fingers a little. You mutter under your breath about the calluses on your palms having their own calluses. But it's a familiar rhythm: draw, pour, carry, and you do it with the muscle memory of someone who could probably do this blindfolded and asleep. You return to the jur, water sloshing slightly in a skin bucket. Inside, one of the older kids has stirred and is attempting to sit upright while still dreaming. You toss them a friendly insult and hand them the kettle, which they grudgingly place on the iron tripod over last night's coals. Soon, you're all sipping tea, a strange but deeply satisfying mix of black tea, yak milk, salt, and a chunk of butter. You drink it not because it tastes like heaven, but because it works. You can feel the warmth crawl through your ribs like a sunbeam. Breakfast isn't really a meal here, just a bite of curds. Maybe a dumpling left from dinner, or a scrap of dried meat chewed quietly while watching the fire flicker in its little iron bowl. You glance around at your home walls lined with saddle blankets, your best bowls hanging in neat rows, a stack of fermented cheese pressed in a wooden mold near the door. You once read that the jeer's circular shape is meant to mimic the sky. It definitely mimics the chaos of shared living. As the sky turns brighter, the men finally stir. One of them immediately forgets where he put his boots. Another pretends he can't hear the baby crying. You sigh. Being a woman of the steppe means knowing exactly where everyone's things are at all times and pretending not to care that you do. Outside, the dogs have fully woken up and are already circling the perimeter of the camp. You whistle sharply, and your mare, yes, your own, comes trotting over. She has a bit of an attitude, but she knows you're the one who braids her mane just right. You stroke her neck, check her hooves, and whisper something about today's winds. She flicks her ears in that way horses do when they know you're talking nonsense. Historians still argue whether Mongol women rode into battle or stayed back to manage the camps, but one thing they agree on: without the women, nothing functioned. The empire didn't expand on charisma alone. Someone had to feed everyone, pack up the jurs, repair harnesses, and remind Genghis's cousin where he left his second-best hat. You take a moment to watch the sky. It's not even breakfast by modern standards, but already your body has done half a day's work. And yet, there's a strange peace in the rhythm. No emails, no commutes. Just you, your animals, the wind, and a sky big enough to forget everything else. Back inside, the kids are now fully awake and demanding more tea. One of them points at a spider on the ceiling and screams like the heavens are falling. You squash it with a piece of wool and get a cheer, followed by a request for a story about the time you tried to milk a yak with a head cold and nearly fell into the bucket. You refuse, of course, but secretly, you're smiling. You've been up for 3 hours, and your day has only just begun. The first chore of the morning after tea, spiders, and someone's missing mitten brings you outside again. This time with a carved wooden bucket and a small, mildly grumpy stool. It's time to milk the mares. You walk across the dew-sparkled grass with your shawl wrapped tightly around your shoulders. A few goats eye you suspiciously, and one trots after you for a minute before deciding it has better things to chew. The sun is barely above the hills, casting long golden streaks across the camp. Your mare waits with a hoof half lifted, pretending she's never been milked in her life. You crouch beside her, with your legs braced and the bucket steady, pressing your forehead lightly against her side as you begin. The rhythmic, quiet motion of milking is almost meditative. The only sounds are the soft squelch of milk hitting the wood and the occasional tail flick that brushes against your back like an affectionate, slightly damp slap. Mare's milk isn't quite like cows. It's thinner, sweeter, and famously fermented into arag, the slightly sour, lightly alcoholic beverage that fuels half the festivals and most adult conversations on the steppe. But today, it's not about the drink. It's about the rhythm. Once you've collected enough, you pass the reins to your oldest daughter. She gives you the teenager look, but takes the bucket without complaint. She knows what's next churning. The churn, a tall, narrow, wooden container, is already out by the side of the jur. You pour the milk in, tie the lid, and start the process, lifting and dropping the plunger again and again in slow, even strokes. It's not glamorous, but it's your gym, your spa, and your oddly satisfying daily ritual. If meditation had a soundtrack, it would probably be this squishy, sloshy cadence. A neighbor strolls over with her own bucket and joins you. You exchange a few non-committal greetings, just a grunt and a raised eyebrow. The Mongol steppe isn't known for chatty mornings. Still, it's comforting having someone else nearby. Both of you rhythmically working the churns like some quiet nomadic percussion band. You pause for a break and sip a bit of fresh milk from a ladle carved by your grandfather. It tastes grassy, faintly sweet, and stronger than it should, like it remembers the wildness of the animal it came from. Historians debate whether Mongol women had more freedom than their counterparts in other medieval cultures. The evidence leans toward yes. Women owned livestock, ran households, arranged marriages, and, in some cases, even administered justice. But on mornings like this, you're less concerned with abstract freedoms and more with whether the butter will separate properly. As you churn, your mind drifts. You think about the big festival next week, how many dumplings to make, whether your cousin will wear that absurd feathered hat again, and if the new mayor will settle down in time to join the parade. You also think about how many belts your youngest son has lost in a single season for, and counting, and whether it's worth making a new one out of scrap felt. Your neighbor breaks the silence with a casual joke about someone's attempt at cheese last week, a disaster so notable it's still a campfire topic. You laugh, then offer her a taste of the arag you made yesterday. She sips, nods approvingly, and quietly critiques the aftertaste. You pretend to be offended. The sun has risen higher now, casting a warm glow over the herds. The sheep have begun their slow wander, nibbling anything that doesn't flee. One of the dogs barks at a butterfly, misses, then flops dramatically onto the grass as if to say, "I tried." A few of the men ride out to check the grazing grounds. You notice they're leaving without saddlebags or water flasks. Typical. You make a mental note to pack food for them again before they realize, halfway out, that arag isn't hydration. You step back into the jur to check the butter consistency. Still a few minutes to go. You use the time to knead dough for tonight's dumplings, gently stretching and folding, feeling the flour work its way into your skin. Your fingers are dusted white, and you draw a little spiral on the table with your fingertip, just for fun. There's a song playing softly in your head, one your grandmother used to hum when she was angry. Oddly enough, it's about a horse that falls in love with a cloud, which sounds poetic until you remember the ending involves lightning and a dramatic fall into a river. Still, the melody is soothing, and you hum it under your breath as you return outside to check the churn. The butter has finally separated thick, golden, and promising. You scoop it out with care and wrap it in clean linen, setting it aside to cool in the shadow of the gur. Then, you ladle the remaining buttermilk into a jug to mix with tea later. Nothing is wasted, not out here. A breeze picks up, lifting a corner of your headscarf. You pull it tight and scan the sky for signs of weather change. The clouds today are lazy, curling like smoke. That usually means a calm afternoon. Probably, you start washing the churn with ash water and a fistful of dry grass. It's a tedious task, and yet, like everything else, there's a quiet satisfaction in it. It feels good to finish something, even if you'll be doing it all again tomorrow. One of the younger children runs over, breathless. holding a chicken. You didn't even know there were chickens nearby. She proudly announces that she has named it Goat, and then runs off again. You stare after her for a moment, unsure whether to correct the logic or just accept it as a Monday. The air now smells of milk, grass, and possibility. And even though you've already churned a gallon, argued gently about flavor, and mediated a chicken naming scandal all before midday, you still feel strangely rested, because this life, while never still, moves like a lullaby, and you've learned to dance with it. One churn, one mare, one warm wooden bucket at a time. By now, the sun has pulled itself fully above the horizon, hanging like a lazy lantern in the pale blue sky. Shadows have shortened. The wind has picked up just enough to tug at your scarf, and your herd is scattered across the steppe like woolly punctuation marks on a page of golden grass. It's time to tend the animals. You grab your herding stick, a worn, polished staff that's as much a part of you as your boots, and give a short, low whistle. Your horse perks up. She knows that sound. You've trained her well, though she still insists on pretending she doesn't hear you the first time, just to keep things interesting. Mounting up is its own ceremony. You ride side saddle, not because you have to, but because it feels like second nature. You wrap the reins around your wrist, balance your stick in the crook of your arm, and nudge her forward with your heels. The world begins to move differently when you're on horseback, smoother, quieter, as though the air parts politely to let you through. The goats are your first stop. They've wandered a bit too close to a stream and are looking shifty, which usually means they're plotting to jump it and cause chaos. You click your tongue, give a practiced sk, and wave your stick gently. The goats respond like slightly drunk toddlers, confused, alarmed, and ultimately obedient. Your horse moves with the casual authority of someone who has done this every day of her life. You guide her with a light shift of your hips, barely touching the reins. Together, you herd the goats back towards safer grazing, occasionally tossing out affectionate insults. One goat seems determined to chew on your boot. You tap it gently with the stick and sigh. You again. Historians still puzzle over how Mongol herders manage such large, free-ranging flocks without fencing. The answer is deceptively simple practice, patience, and a language of sounds that only the animals and possibly very bored spirits can understand. Some women swear by singing lullabies to their yaks. Others say it's all in the eyebrow raise. You've got your own methods, and they work, mostly. Once the goats are under control, you check on the sheep. They're less dramatic, but far more judgmental, always staring like they're considering writing a report on your technique. You ride past them slowly, scanning for injuries, strays, or potential escape artists. One ewe is limping slightly. You dismount, crouch beside her, and check her hoof, just a stuck thorn. You pull it gently, whisper a few soothing words, and let her nuzzle your sleeve before trotting off. The grass here is good soft, thick, and fragrant with spring. You make a note of it for future migrations. The animals seem content. You let your horse graze for a while as you sit nearby, legs crossed, basking in the sun. You tear a piece of dried curd from your pouch and chew slowly. The texture is roughly granite meets chalk, but it keeps your jaw busy and your stomach from growling. From this little rise, you can see the entire camp A circle of white jurs, smoke rising from the stovepipes, children chasing each other in wild zigzags, and dogs sleeping in strategically inconvenient locations. It's both chaotic and serene, like a concert played entirely on flutes made of cheese. You stand and stretch, feeling the tug of well-used muscles. A hawk glides overhead, casting a shadow that startles a rabbit from a bush. Your horse flicks her tail, uninterested. You mount again and continue the wide loop around the herd, humming as you go. The song shifts and blends into the wind, lost somewhere between a lullaby and a herding chant. You pass another woman doing her rounds. You exchange nods, her stick raised in a salute of solidarity. Neither of you needs to speak. You both know what it means to keep things moving without fuss. Some scholars argue whether women on the steppe were considered equals or simply indispensable. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. You are respected not because of what you symbolize, but because if you don't do your job, nobody eats. You return to camp by mid-afternoon, just in time to stop a calf from getting tangled in the laundry line. You guide it back with gentle shoves and a few sarcastic comments about its sense of direction. It blinks at you, unconcerned, then flops into the grass as if it meant to do that all along. Back inside the jur, you shed your outer layer and stretch out on a mat for a quick rest. The walls hum faintly with the wind, and you close your eyes for just a moment. Your fingers still twitch slightly from the reins. Your back still feels the curve of the saddle, and your nose still carries the scent of sun-warmed fur. This life is constant motion animals to guide, children to teach, wind to read, but in the rhythm of it, there's an unexpected peace. You know every hoof sound, every tail twitch, every twitch of grass that signals someone's about to make a break for the forest, and tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Side saddle, stick in hand, wind in your ears, and a grin on your face when that one goat yes, him again, tries to chew your boot and pretend he's innocent. Back from the midday herding rounds, you duck once again into your gur, the flap swaying behind you like a curtain in a dream. It smells of butter, old wool, and the slow burn of dung cakes in the stove home. In other words, now, with animals mostly where they should be, and the youngest children napping in a cuddle pile like sleepy marmots, you finally get a moment to sit cross-legged with a pile of wool in your lap and begin the quiet craft work that ties every part of this life together. First up, felt, it doesn't sound thrilling, and to be honest, it isn't. But making felt is one of those ancient arts that feels more like a spell than a chore. You fluff the wool with your fingers, teasing out bits of grass and the occasional mystery crumb. The wool is soft but stubborn, much like every member of your household. You lay it in thick, overlapping sheets, sprinkle it with water, and begin the pressing. You roll it, stomp it, and sometimes even sing to it. Some women swear their felt lasts longer when it's sung to. Others claim it's all about the rhythm of your kneading. You've never tested either theory formally, but your felt boots have outlived 2 husbands and a yak, so you must be doing something right. Outside, someone is yelling at a runaway chicken. Again, you smile, roll your eyes skyward, and keep pressing. Once the felt is thick enough, you set it aside to dry. From there, it'll become just about anything: insulating floor mats, saddle blankets, or even a new gear lining for when the wind starts sounding like it's got teeth again. Nothing here is made for beauty alone, though everything carries a strange, rugged grace. Next, you pick up your needle and a piece of worn leather. Stitching is another quiet pleasure, a steady act of making something from nothing. Today, you're reinforcing the heels of a pair of winter boots. You thread the sinew through with practiced ease, each pull tight and certain. Your fingers are tough enough now that the needle doesn't bite too deep, but you still keep a little beeswax nearby for extra grip. Your mind drifts as you work. You remember your mother teaching you how to make your first pair of boots? The pattern was a mess, the stitching crooked, but she wore them anyway until they literally fell apart. She said it was important to walk in someone's first effort. You still smile thinking about that. Historians often describe Mongol women as practical, industrious, unadorned. But they rarely mention the quiet artistry, how your stitch lines are neat enough to make a monk weep, or how your applique of felt flowers makes even your grumpiest cousin's saddlebag look vaguely cheerful. No one's weaving tapestries here, but style still sneaks in. You set the boots aside and turn to a more delicate project, a new headband for your niece's wedding. It's a simple thing, just soft blue cloth with silver thread and 2 tiny bells that will chime softly when she turns her head. You sew slowly now, your hands steady, the light from the doorway falling just right on the fabric. You add a swirl of embroidery at the edge, a little flourish she won't expect. Somewhere out on the steppe, a horse neighs and a herd dog answers. You keep stitching. There's an old belief, one passed down like a secret, that if you whisper a wish into your thread before sewing it into a garment, that wish will follow the wearer. So, when no one's looking, you quietly murmur something about joy, long winters full of laughter, and no more lost mittens. You knot the thread and smile. You stand, stretch your arms, and check your work. The sun has moved further west now, its angle sending golden light across the floor, catching on the tiny bells and casting shimmering flecks on the wool wall. It feels like you're inside a snow globe of sunlight and soft effort. You hang the headband near the stove to bless it with warmth. Then you glance around and, with a deep breath, grab a new roll of wool. There's always more to do. A saddle pad needs extra lining before the next migration. Your cousin requested a felt hat that won't blow off this time, and your mother has dropped several unsubtle hints about needing a padded seat for her aging horse. Your fingers ache slightly. But there's something comforting in the repetition. This isn't factory work, it's tradition disguised as productivity. Every stitch is a conversation with your ancestors. Every line of felt is another paragraph in your family's story. Some days, you think about how strange this would seem to someone from another world, say, a knight from France, or a silk merchant from the Song dynasty. They'd marvel at your jur, scratch their heads at your saddle technique, and probably ask if you had any real furniture. You'd laugh and point to your cushion, your best saddle, and your perfectly sewn boots. What else does anyone need? Even your tools carry stories. Your mother's curved needle with the crack down one side, the ivory thimble your sister carved from a sheep's tooth, the spindle you've dropped more times than you'll admit, but still spins true. Historians still debate how much influence Mongol women had in the rise of the empire. Some argue they shaped it from behind the scenes, managing resources, maintaining mobility, and anchoring families. Others believe their influence was more symbolic. You, however, don't have time for symbols. You're too busy keeping everyone warm, stitched, and vaguely presentable. You finish the day's sewing with a pair of mittens that look slightly lopsided on purpose. You insist and tidy up your corner. The kids are stirring now, asking for snacks. The baby has found a spoon and declared it a sword. Someone's shouting about a goat in the water bucket. You shake your head, fold your wool carefully, and whisper to yourself, "Tomorrow, I'll finish that hat." Then, you go outside into the amber light, your hands still smelling faintly of lanolin and your mind full of color, cloth, and the gentle rhythm of stitches that never truly stop. You step out of the jur, just in time to catch your youngest boy proudly wearing a fur hat 3 sizes too big, perched backward, with a feather sticking out that absolutely no bird on the steppe could have possibly donated willingly. Fashion, apparently, starts young. It's time to get everyone dressed for the late afternoon chores. And while you don't exactly have a closet full of seasonal trends, dressing well on the steppe is very much an art. You reach for your deal, a traditional robe worn by both men and women. Yours is a deep plum color, faded a little from years of sun and stories, but still soft and strong. It wraps left over right, tied at the waist with a wide sash that doubles as a storage belt, baby carrier, and emergency saddle cushion. Today's weather is that fussy kind of wind, mild, but judgmental, so you grab a fur-lined vest and your favorite felt hat, the one with the stitched ear flaps that make you look like a cheerful mushroom. Mongol fashion is equal parts necessity and quiet elegance. Everything serves a purpose. Your boots are turned up at the toe, not for flair, but so you don't dig into the earth as you walk. Your jewelry isn't just decorative. It can tell someone your clan, your marital status, and whether or not you won the cooking competition at last year's Nadam festival. You smooth your deal, tuck a comb into your sash, and step into your boots. They're well worn, made from stiff leather, and creak in a friendly way as you move. You once patched the left one with a piece of camel hide, and it's held up for 6 migrations and a stampede. As you help the younger children dress, you marvel at how every layer tells a story. The baby's boots were once your oldest son's. The girl's beaded necklace was a gift from your sister when she turned 12, along with a lecture about never trusting a man who keeps his horse too clean. Your eldest daughter helps her younger cousin tie her sash, muttering good-natured complaints about how no one under 10 can tie a knot that lasts. You smile. That's how it starts. First, they learn to dress each other. Next thing you know, they're stitching saddlebags and managing the dairy herd like small queens. Outside, your neighbor arrives with a small pouch of red thread and a bar of soap carved to look like a sheep. For the wedding, she says with a smirk, everyone likes practical gifts. You nod in agreement. Flowers wilt. Soap lasts. As the sun slants lower, the world turns golden and your gear glows like a lantern from the inside. You grab a small mirror, silvered, slightly dented, and check your reflection. There's a bit of butter on your cheek from this morning. You wipe it off, then rebraid your hair, weaving in a narrow red ribbon, not because anyone's judging, but because it feels nice to do something just for you. Historians sometimes remark that steppe cultures lacked adornment. But you know better. You've seen a widow's mourning belt, blackened with soot and worn for a year. You've seen brides in bright silk boots embroidered with constellations. You've seen young girls fashion earrings from scraps of glass and beads traded for song. Even your own ear ornaments, small copper discs shaped like the moon hold meaning. Your grandmother gave them to you after your first child was born, saying, "Now you know how to pull life from the sky." You're still not sure what she meant, but you wear them anyway. You pause to check the stitching on a cousin's deal, only to discover he's wearing it inside out. You point this out. He insists it's a new style. You roll your eyes so hard you might need herbs to fix it later. As you sit outside with a bowl of curds and watch the wind comb through the grass, you take a moment to admire everyone's look. The kids are in various states of partial decency. The men's sashes are either tied too tight or not at all. And your mother has declared war on a frayed hem. But still, the colors shine deep blues, saffron golds, dusty greens, and each person wears their story on their sleeves. Literally, your fashion is about more than appearances. It keeps out wind, holds in heat, marks you as part of a clan, and lets you carry half your belongings without using a single bag. Your sash currently holds a bone comb, a flint, 3 dried apricots, and a piece of string you've been meaning to use for something since spring. And then there's the jewelry. You open a small wooden box inside your jur and gently lift out a necklace. It's not made of gold or gems, but of polished stones, shaped glass beads, and one very suspiciously shark-like tooth someone swore came from a river spirit. You wear it only for festivals or to scare off unhelpful uncles. You tuck it back in its box, smiling. There's even an argument among historians, yes, again, about whether Mongol women borrowed fashion from the cultures they conquered. You could have told them the truth. Fashion here is borrowed from the wind, the horses, and your grandmother's stubborn sense of color. If something keeps you warm, moves with you, and looks good with goat hair in your lap, it stays. By now, your deal is slightly rumpled. Your boots are dusted with grass fluff, and someone has tied a string of bells to your horse's tail for decoration. She seems indifferent. You pretend not to notice how cute it is. As twilight creeps in, you wrap a scarf around your shoulders and light the evening fire. The smoke rises in gentle swirls, catching the last light like ribbons of silver. You sit, watching the flame. Your clothes warm with the day's sunlight. Your sash still bulging with apricots and possibility. And as the wind whistles through the steppe, tugging at the hems of every deal in the camp, you think to yourself, who needs a runway when you have this? The sun dips low, brushing the tops of distant hills with streaks of copper and peach. You sit just outside your gur, sipping the last of the afternoon's salted tea, when someone from your extended family wanders over with the distinctive look of a person preparing to meddle. You brace yourself. It's matchmaking time. Matriarchs of the Mongol world wield their influence with a wool-wrapped iron fist. And today, apparently, it's your turn to participate willingly or otherwise. The woman in question, your aunt on your mother's side, sits beside you without asking, tugs her scarf tighter against the breeze, and starts talking about someone's son. You recognize the setup immediately. The tone, the phrasing, the sudden interest in your niece's cooking skills, it's all very clear. His sheep are healthy, she says. His gur doesn't leak. and he owns 3 horses, one of which only bites on weekends. You nod solemnly. Truly, a dream. This is what they don't tell you in dusty textbooks. Mongol matchmaking isn't just about alliances or dowries. It's a family sport, a team effort, a quiet negotiation carried out over dumplings, sideways glances, and a subtle series of insults disguised as compliments. And the women, especially the older ones, are the referees, coaches, and play-by-play commentators. As the conversation continues, other women drift over. Someone brings fresh egg. Someone else pulls out goat bone dice. And like that, you're in the middle of a full-fledged evening social. The children run wild nearby, occasionally crashing into the circle, asking for snacks or urgent updates about whose turn it is to pretend to be a sheep. You shoo them off with a half-hearted scolding and return your attention to the matter at hand, family politics disguised as casual gossip. One woman leans in, voice low. Did you hear about Tumen's daughter? Ran off with a weaver from the next clan. They say he makes excellent boots. There are gasps, followed by admiration. Good boots are no small matter. You glance across the fire and catch your own daughter's eye. She's pretending not to listen, but her ears are definitely twitching. You smile at her, a little proud, a little concerned. She's reaching that age where she wants to decide things herself, which is admirable, and also a logistical nightmare. Historians sometimes reduce the women of the steppe to background characters strong but silent, hard-working but passive. What they forget is this: you're the ones pulling the strings. You're the ones arranging marriages that will shape whole herds, whole clans, sometimes whole corners of the empire. And yet, somehow, you still have to be the ones making dinner. As the sun vanishes and the fire takes center stage, talk turns to family management. Who's building a new jur? Who's expecting twins? Who mysteriously has 4 sheep more than last month and claims they simply wandered in? You offer advice where it's wanted, and sometimes where it's not. You've been managing this household long enough to know when someone's telling a half-truth, or when they're just tired and need to talk in circles until they figure things out. You sip your tea, nod sagely, and offer a story about a goat that once chose your ex-husband over you. He didn't take it well. Inside the jur, the fire crackles. Someone brings out a basket of steamed dumplings. The children descend like wolves, each grabbing 2 and running off into the dark. One drops his on the way and tries to convince his cousin it was extra seasoned. A minor scuffle ensues. No one loses a tooth this time, so you consider it a win. You stretch your legs and let your shoulders relax. The cool of evening settles into your bones in a not unpleasant way. You adjust your shawl, grateful for the layers, and start planning tomorrow's meals in your head. Someone's going to need new boots soon. Someone else has outgrown his deal. And you still haven't finished the padded seat for your mother's old horse. You sigh. It's a good sigh. A breeze stirs the smoke, and your aunt leans over again. So, about that boy with the 3 horses, you raise a hand. Let's talk tomorrow, tonight. I just want to listen to the fire and pretend none of you are trying to marry off half the camp. There's laughter, a few playful jabs, and eventually, the circle begins to dissolve. One by one, your companions disappear into their jurs, carrying leftover dumplings, gossip, and tentative plans for the next round of proposals. You linger outside for a moment longer, watching the fire flicker low. The stars begin to show up, at first shy, then bold, then spilling across the sky in waves. The steppe transforms under starlight, softer, slower, secretive. You tuck your hands into your sleeves and close your eyes for a breath. You've negotiated alliances, managed 5 children, settled one dispute over a missing goat, and politely declined an overly enthusiastic suitor, all before bedtime. And you didn't even spill your tea. The night settles in, and with it comes the hush that only the steppe knows how to conjure. You've banked the fire, tucked in the smallest children, and closed the flap of the gur. Now, it's time for the most ancient of tasks, storytelling. You light a small oil lamp, its glow flickering gently across the round walls, and arrange the cushions into a makeshift audience arena. Tonight's listeners include 2 wide-eyed children, one dozing uncle who claims not to be listening, but definitely is, and a dog who only attends story hour for the crumbs. You sit cross-legged, spine straight, voice calm. You begin, as always, with the words passed down like thread, long ago, before horses had names and stars had numbers. Your voice wraps around the room like a blanket. The tale tonight is about the first herder to speak the language of deer, a woman with wind in her hair and a firefly in her pocket. It's not a true story, at least not in the way scholars might measure truth. But that's not the point. In this world, stories are tools, part lullaby, part law, part long-term memory. They explain the shape of mountains, the reason goats sometimes act like they're possessed, and how to handle a marriage proposal that comes with 2 sheep and suspiciously little eye contact. As you talk, the children's eyes begin to glaze in that delicious, sleep-heavy way. One lies down with their head in your lap. The other clutches a pillow shaped vaguely like a horse. Historians often dismiss these tales as superstition or oral tradition with a condescending asterisk. But you know better. This is how history survives when there's no ink, no paper, just voices and memory, and the steady rhythm of words passed from one firelight to the next. Tonight's story includes a trickster fox, a singing river, and a feather that could tickle a ghost. You add flourishes as you go, drawing quiet giggles and even a low chuckle from the not sleeping uncle. You pretend not to notice. You pause mid-sentence, only to have a child whisper, "And then what?" This is your favorite part? The gasp, the urgency, the way they lean closer, already part of the tale, outside. The wind carries sounds from other jurors, faint songs, muffled laughter, a goat complaining dramatically. You lower your voice, softening each word like snow falling on felt. You shift to another tale, this one older, heavier, the story of a matriarch who guided her clan through a winter so cruel. The horses grew silent, and the water turned to stone. Her name is still sung during migrations, your grandmother used to say. And some believe she still whispers to the brave during snowstorms. This story doesn't end neatly. It fades, like breath on glass. You let the silence settle. One of the children has fallen asleep completely. The other fights it valiantly, blinking slower and slower, gripping your sleeve. And then you bring out the goat bone dice. Yes, storytelling doesn't have to end with sleep. Sometimes it ends with a little game. The dice are smooth, carved from knuckle bones, and etched with symbols only Steppe children can truly decipher. You shake them in a cup and let them clatter on the floor. 2 suns and a rabbit, you announce. This, apparently, means you must sing the cranky marmot song. You sing poorly. This causes fits of laughter, which in turn triggers the dozing uncle to grunt and roll over, muttering something about marmots don't sing. They steal food. The children insist on one more round. You agree, because bedtime is a flexible suggestion at best out here. There's a game about guessing which animal the dice want you to mimic. You end up braying like a donkey, flapping like a hawk, and, at one point, pretending to be a fish in the middle of a dry grassland. The performance is met with great approval. Eventually, the lamp begins to flicker lower. You draw the children close. Hum an old tune your mother used to murmur when you couldn't sleep, and let the room grow still. Your voice slows. The stories soften. The dice are tucked away. The last embers of the fire crackle faintly, casting shifting shadows on the round walls. You glance at the ceiling, the curved lattice above, like ribs of a sleeping beast, and wonder how many generations of women have done exactly this, told stories, made games from bones, pulled sleep from thin air. Some scholars argue that nomadic cultures lack permanence. But sitting here, surrounded by the slow breath of sleeping children, the soft creak of the jur, and the warmth of words passed down like heirlooms, you'd argue they're wrong. What you build may not stand in stone, but it lasts in stories. You tuck the blankets tighter, kiss one small forehead, and lie back on your own mat, letting the day slip from your shoulders. Outside, the wind hums a low lullaby. Tomorrow, there will be more stories, but for tonight, this one has ended exactly where it should. Morning again, but this one's slower. The kind where the wind isn't howling, the goats aren't escaping, and nobody's accidentally set their sleeve on fire. Yet, you ease into the day with a pot of warm tea and a handful of dried curds, chewing thoughtfully as you mentally go over what's left in the food pouch. It's not that you're running low. Your planning is too good for that. It's just time to replenish. And that means diving back into one of the Steppe's most underappreciated arts, making food that can survive wind, time, and possibly an earthquake or two. You step outside and scan the area near the jir, where you keep your supplies, an organized mess of bags, baskets, and tightly wrapped bundles. You squat beside a wooden box covered with a felt cloth and begin untying it with the reverence of someone opening a treasure chest. Inside, dried meats, pressed cheese blocks, pickled things in questionable jars, and several cakes of arag butter you may or may not have promised to your cousin and then forgotten about. You unwrap a cloth bundle to reveal the heart of your nomadic pantry bortsog, or deep-fried dough twists, crunchy, a bit sweet, and durable enough to double as defense weapons in a pinch. The children adore them, mostly for their crunch, and the fact that they look suspiciously like sheep droppings, only tastier. Your first task today is drying more meat. You slice it thin with your favorite blade, the one with the carved horn handle. You hang the strips over a taut rope stretched between 2 posts, letting the wind do what the wind does, best dehydrate things with alarming efficiency. Historians might call it jerky. You just call it lunch insurance. Nearby, your daughter is kneading dough for dumplings. her hands moving in practiced circles. She's muttering to herself, probably rehearsing a comeback for an argument she hasn't had yet. You smile and help her shape the dough into tidy little moons. Inside, each dumpling goes a mix of minced mutton, wild onion, and herbs you picked during last month's migration. You seal them tight, arrange them on a wide wooden tray, and set them aside to steam over the central fire. Some of the dumplings will be eaten tonight. Others will be dried. Yes, dried dumplings stored away for later when you're too tired or snowed in to cook from scratch. Out here, food isn't just fuel. It's planning, legacy, and love you can chew. You take a break to churn a small batch of butter, only to discover someone has refilled the churn with tea instead of milk. You squint toward the juror. A guilty child-shaped blur dashes away. You make a mental note to assign that one dishwashing for the next 3 days. Next up, curds. You slice yesterday's batch into small cubes and place them on a wooden rack to dry. In a few days, they'll be rock hard and perfect for long rides or bribing the family dog. You sample one, nearly chip a tooth, and nod approvingly. Just right. As you work, you find yourself humming again. An old tune. Something about a crow that stole a cheese wheel and got mistaken for a war hero. Classic. You start a fire to roast a few bones, the kind used to make broth on long rides. You collect the marrow, pack it with herbs, and set it in a skin pouch. This will be your secret weapon come winter. Bone broth with wild mint and a pinch of salt is the closest thing to comfort food this side of the Gobi. A neighbor walks over with a trade request. She's offering dried apricots for your leftover curds. You raise an eyebrow. Apricots are rare this time of year, especially ones this plump. You make the deal. Then give her a few dumplings for the road, because food without kindness is just calories. She offers you a fig in return and whispers a rumor about someone in the next camp making sausage with horse meat. You both pretend to be horrified. You'll ask for the recipe later. Historians still argue about how the Mongols managed to feed their armies across such vast, hostile terrain. The answer, as you well know, is a combination of genius-level preservation techniques and women like you, who could prepare a feast with 3 ingredients and a knife the size of a spoon. You pause to stir a pot of tea bubbling on the stove. You toss in a twist of butter and a handful of salt. The scent wraps around the jur like a shawl. A passing child sniffs the air, then immediately claims they are starving to death. You hand them a piece of dry cheese and tell them to chew slowly, perhaps over the course of the next 3 hours. Outside, the meat flaps gently in the breeze like little prayer flags of nutrition. You feel a flicker of pride. Each strip is cut precisely, angled to the wind, and spaced to avoid shadow. You once taught a trader from the West how to do it, and he wept when his meat came out perfect. You still tease him about it in letters. The dumplings are done. You lift the lid of the steamer, and a cloud of fragrant joy greets you. Mutton, onions, herbs all fused together in soft dough pouches that could warm even the crankiest uncle. You set a few aside for dinner and begin drying the rest, laying them out in neat rows. Your food stores are full again. The rack of curds, the pouch of broth balls, the dumpling drawer, yes, it's a thing. Even your emergency snack scarf is restocked. You clean your hands with a splash of tea wipe them on your apron, and sit on the threshold of the jeer to admire your work. The sun is just beginning to dip again, sending streaks of gold across the grass. A child shouts in the distance about having invented soup, and you hear a pot clatter shortly after. You smile, take a bite of bortsog, and savor the crunch. Food here doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to last. And when you've made it with your own hands, when every dried curd or dumpling or hunk of meat is a piece of your daily rhythm, it tastes exactly right. You lean back against the doorframe of your gyr, watching the last of the sunlight pour across the grass like melted gold. The animals are beginning to settle, and so is the wind, softening from its usual chatter to a sleepy hum. But your day isn't quite done, not until the gyr itself is cleaned, calmed, and properly fussed over. You step inside and take a slow, satisfied look around. It's not just a tent. It's a portable world. The gyr, your gyr, is a marvel of ancient engineering, built for movement, for storms, for lives that pack and unpack like breathing. You run your hand along the curved wall of wooden lattice, the khana, smoothed by years of wear and the occasional toddler bite. The structure breathes, flexes, and holds warmth like a wool-wrapped secret. First things first, you sweep. Your broom isn't much, just some bundled twigs tied with stubborn string, but it knows every inch of the floor. You guide it in circles, pushing dust, felt fibers, and a suspicious number of feathers toward the center, then out the flap. You wonder, briefly, how the same number of birds could possibly be molting year-round. The center of the gyr is sacred space, the fire pit, the heart. Around it, your cooking pots, tea supplies, and a small wooden chest that holds letters, bone dice, and a very old comb that once belonged to your great aunt, who could pluck a splinter out of a goat's hoof with a scowl alone. You straighten cushions, fluff the sleeping mats, and re-roll the hide bundle where you keep the festival garments. The children's corner is a chaos of toys, scarves, and a goat skull being used as a doll. You tidy it, choosing not to ask questions. Now the cozy part, you settle by the hearth and begin preparing the tea nook, more of a suggestion than an official corner. But it lives beside a low shelf where you keep the nice bowls, a precious ceramic cup traded from a Chinese merchant, and a silk cloth embroidered with a scene so faded it now resembles either a mountain or a rather shy camel. You unwrap the tea leaves, spoon them into the pot, and add water from your morning haul, a pinch of salt, a spoonful of butter. The kettle simmers with a familiar song, and the scent begins to rise sharp, warm, strangely soothing. As it brews, you rearrange a few objects, a horseshoe-shaped charm above the door, a string of beads looped near the roof opening, and a scrap of blue cloth tied to the central column, a nod to the sky spirits. You whisper a brief thank you to them, not because you're superstitious, exactly, just courteous. There's something grounding about this quiet reset. No noise, but the tea boiling, the wind brushing the felt walls, and the occasional thunk of a curious child walking into the side of the gyr. Again, historians debate whether the interior of a Mongol gyr was strictly gendered space. Some say men kept to one side, women to another. You've always found that idea a bit laughable. Sure, there are customs tools here, kitchen there, But when it comes down to it, whoever needs something goes and gets it. Whether it's a bowl of tea or a spare bridle, still, there's a rhythm to where things live. The left side is the woman's side, where cooking tools and food stores are kept. The right side tends to hold saddles, bows, and the occasional confused goat that snuck in during a storm. The back center holds the family altar or most treasured items, heirlooms, keepsakes, maybe a special rock collected by a child who swore it could talk. You sip your tea, now perfectly steeped, and light a small oil lamp. Its glow flickers off the silver trim of your best bowl, the one you only use when company's over or when you need to remind yourself that beauty still matters, even when there's butter in your hair. The younger kids have dozed off on a pile of blankets, half covered in felt and dreams. You adjust the flap slightly, letting just enough cool air in to keep the fire honest. Then you sit, quietly, and listen to the sound of your home. It creaks a little in the wind. The stove murmurs. The wooden frame settles. It all moves like a living thing, one that's been shaped by your hands, your stories, your way of life. You know every peg, every crack, every spot where someone spilled tea during a wrestling match. And there, in the corner, you notice a small hole in the felt, a tear no bigger than a walnut. You sigh, fetch your sewing kit, and patch it with a quick stitch. You choose blue thread, not because anyone will see it, but because the sky deserves a bit of itself returned. You know that soon. This entire gear will be packed onto carts again. The lattice folded, the felt rolled, the hearth emptied, the tea set bundled in cloth. And yet, it will all go back up the same way. Because the gear isn't a house, it's a habit, a shape your life remembers. Even when the road curves, you lean back on your cushion, sip the last of your tea, and glance at the small wooden shelf by the wall. On it, a tin cup, a dried flower from last summer's hill, and a lump of salt you keep not for cooking, but because it was the first thing your son ever traded on his own. Your home may be made of felt and wood, but it's stitched together with memories. And as the lamp flickers and the fire dims, you think, yes, it's clean, it's warm, it's ready for tomorrow, dawn again. Though this one smells of wet grass and something faintly metallic in the air, a sure sign that the clouds have big ideas. You sit up slowly, listen to the horses snorting in the distance, and know what's coming even before your knees pop. It's migration day, or, as you secretly call it, the chaotic ballet of packing your entire life into a moving puzzle. The camp is already humming. People shuffle about, rubbing their eyes, gathering ropes, muttering things like, "Where's my best yoke?" Or "I swear the axle was right here yesterday." You step out into the cool air, scarf already tied against the breeze, and begin the day's monumental task, preparing for seasonal movement. The Mongols migrate several times a year, chasing grass, water, and weather patterns with an almost musical sense of timing. You've done this all your life, yet every time still feels like an unsolvable riddle involving livestock, cartwheels, and the precise folding of felt. You start by emptying the gur. It's not as dramatic as it sounds. You move methodically, bowls and baskets, bedding in rolls, tools bundled in hide wraps. You place everything in neat clusters: food, gear, heirlooms, each with its own designated travel pouch. The children, naturally, are spinning in circles, asking whether the stars will follow you. And if their favorite rock needs its own saddlebag, you give them a pouch and tell them to pack essentials. This later turns out to be 5 goat bones, a broken cup, and 1 slipper. You pretend this is fine. Next, you unfasten the felt outer layer of the jeer. It takes strength, coordination, and several pointed sighs at the wind, which is being less than helpful. You roll each panel carefully, folding it like a stubborn blanket with a sense of humor. Beneath the felt lies the wooden frame, the beautiful lattice that expands and collapses with an almost origami-like elegance. You collapse the walls like an accordion, stack the poles like kindling, and gently lower the crown, the circular top piece that lets smoke out and starlight in. The children scramble over to help, mostly by standing directly in your way. The entire gur fits onto a cart. Let that sink in. Your whole house, everything you cooked in, slept in, argued in, laughed in, packed onto a wooden cart pulled by 2 oxen and held together with rope. Faith, and that one leather strap nobody trusts. Historians are still dazzled by this. How could nomads move so easily, they ask, as if centuries of practice, precise design, and deeply honed efficiency weren't answer enough. You'd invite them to help wrap the smoke hole cover in a crosswind and see how philosophical they feel afterward. Outside, the herd is gathered. Horses, goats, sheep, and cows mill about in varying degrees of cooperation. Your youngest son is riding backward on a pony, claiming it's faster that way. Your daughter is tying ribbons to the lead goat, for reasons no one can explain. The lead goat seems flattered. Your horse is saddled, your tools packed, your scarf tugged down over your ears. Now it's time to move. You mount up and take your place beside the cart, one hand on the reins, the other lightly resting on your knee. The train begins slowly, creaking into motion with a symphony of hooves, wheels, and half-finished breakfast complaints. You glance behind you and watch the land you've just left shrink into the distance, not gone, just resting until next time. The journey is peaceful in that strange, restless way the steppe has. The sky above is vast and indifferent. The grass ripples in long waves, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk calls out like it's telling secrets to the wind. You ride at a slow pace, checking on the children, scanning the herd, occasionally swatting at an overconfident fly. You pass familiar markers, a crooked rock shaped like a sleeping man, the remains of an old campfire pit from last spring, a cluster of wild irises that only bloom for 2 weeks a year. Your family has followed this route for generations. It's written into your muscle memory. Lunch is a quick stop near a stream. You distribute dried meat, flatbread, and a few stubborn pickles that never seem to go bad. One child throws theirs into the stream, declaring it a sacrifice to the fish. You pretend not to notice. After lunch, you check the cartwheels. One is wobbling. Of course it is. You tighten the ropes, adjust the axle, and stuff a piece of felt into the joint. Not elegant, but it'll hold. Mongol engineering isn't about prettiness. It's about solving problems with what's in your pocket. The wind shifts as you near the next pasture. You breathe in the scent of new grass, damp earth, and the distant promise of a storm. Your body hums with a tired kind of satisfaction. By late afternoon, you arrive at your new site, a gentle rise with soft grass, clean water, and good grazing. You dismount, stretch, and begin the process in reverse. Poles first, then lattice, then felt, curved around like the shell of some woolen turtle. The gyr rises again, reborn, home, just moved. You arrange the beds, light the fire, hang the kettle, and take a deep, lung-filling breath. The children are running wild already, claiming new hiding places and arguing about which way the stars will look from this camp. You sit by the door, sip a bit of tea, and look out over your newly reassembled life. You've moved your house, your animals, your family, and lost only one sock in the process. Not bad for a day's work. Evening again. Though this one carries more than the usual breeze, it carries the hush of something sacred. The animals are calm, the fire is steady, and the moon's just begun to tease the edges of the sky. You've unpacked, swept, and even remembered to reclaim your cousin's ladle from last season. You left it in her saddlebag, and she's pretended it was hers ever since. Tonight, though, it's not about chores. Tonight, it's about things older than tools, older than this gyr, older even than memory. It's about life, birth, remedies, and the quiet, smoky corners of belief that wrap the steppe like a second sky. It begins with a whisper from one of the neighboring gyrs. A woman is in labor. You hear it in the way her mother walks quick, low to the ground, carrying water in soft cloths. You hear it in the rustle of women gathering, the soft warnings to curious children to stay clear. And just like that, the gyr transforms from sleeping place to birthplace, and you are quietly summoned inside. There's no panic, only readiness. You gather your kit linen rags, sheep fat salve, a small bone comb tied with blue thread for luck, and duck into the warm, dark hush of the birthing space. The woman lies curled, breathing like the wind, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. Her hair is braided back. Her sister grips her hand. Someone lights a sprig of juniper and waves the smoke gently through the air. Birth on the steppe is not hidden, but it's not paraded either. It's held like a song, half prayer, half practical. You press cool cloth to the mother's forehead, murmur something about her strength, and begin checking the baby's rhythm with your hands, your ears, and a kind of instinct that's been passed down mother to daughter for so long it no longer needs words. Historians still argue about how Mongol women handled medicine, whether midwives were formally trained, or if they relied purely on oral tradition. You'd laugh if you weren't busy. Training. Try catching a breech birth at midnight during a sandstorm with nothing but a knife and a jug of fermented milk. That's training. The fire pops softly. The air is thick with sage and steam. She pushes, you hold her hand. The room tightens, breath held. And then, there it is, the first cry. Sharp and bright, and so startling it feels like the sky itself just opened its eyes. A baby girl. You wrap her quickly in softened wool, whisper a blessing, and lay her on her mother's chest. The mother weeps. The sister weeps. You find something in your eye. Someone brings in hot broth. Someone else adds another log to the fire. The baby squeaks like a bird testing its voice. She's perfect. A little squishy, but perfect. After the birth, you prepare the remedies. First, the sheep fat salve, melted down with herbs and mixed with a bit of powdered bone. It's rubbed into the mother's lower back, knees, and temples, It smells like earth and strength and something ancient. You brew a tea of dried nettle and goat's milk, sweetened with a lump of aged honey and a tiny whisper of salt. The placenta is wrapped and buried near the door of the jur. Some say to anchor the child to the earth, others to confuse evil spirits. Either way, you mark the spot with a white stone. Afterward, you step out into the cool night. The stars are enormous tonight, strung across the heavens like beads you could reach up and pluck. The moon hangs low and generous, but there's more. Later, an old man hobbles toward your gur, gripping his lower back like it's done something unspeakable. He grumbles about a creaky spine and requests your famous bone broth with that extra thing you never tell me about. You oblige. You heat the broth slowly. Add marrow, a hint of wild mint, and the secret thing, which is actually just a specific kind of salt scraped from a mineral spring 3 valleys over. You ladle it into his bowl and hand it to him with a knowing nod. He slurps, winces, slurps again. Still terrible, he says, but I feel better. You grin. It's the complaining that cures you. Later still, you grind dried herbs with a pestle carved from antler. You prepare a sachet for a child who's been plagued by night fears. Inside sage, lavender, dried goat's milk curd, and 1 smooth pebble. You sew it shut and place it beneath his pillow when he's not looking. Spirits on the steppe are a quiet presence. You don't talk about them often, but you leave them their offerings, bits of butter near sacred trees, milk splashed toward the fire, blue ribbons tied high on hills. It's not fear, it's respect. Just because you've never seen something doesn't mean it isn't watching you politely from the edge of a fog bank. You light a tiny dish of incense near your own bed, murmuring thanks to the sky for keeping the horses calm and the goats relatively accounted for. The newborn sleeps. The mother sleeps. Even the wind has quieted, as if to listen. You lie down, wrapped in wool and smoke and the scent of nettle tea, your fingers still stained with herbs, your eyes heavy from the work of holding lives together. Some say medicine is for cities, but here, healing is braided into your days like hair, steady, firm, and full of unspoken wisdom. No degrees, no charts, just hands, hearts, and a fierce memory that refuses to let go. You exhale slowly, knowing tomorrow will bring more needs, more bruises, more small miracles. But for now, the fire is low, the baby is safe, and the wind, for once, is silent. The fire's still warm when you wake, but barely. You stir slowly, stretching one leg out from under the woolen blanket and bracing yourself for the slight crunch of old bones and yesterday's saddle ache. Outside, the camp is already shifting into motion hoofbeats, kettle whistles, someone yelling at a sheep as if it speaks fluent Mongolian. You sit up and remember the baby born last night. A little girl with lungs like a war trumpet and fingers that already know how to cling. You smile, then rise to start tea. But as the water heats, you find yourself drifting mentally, not physically, because today you can feel the ghosts of queens in the wind. You've heard their names since childhood. Powerful women whose stories didn't get written down with fanfare or calligraphy, but were stitched into saddlebags, whispered during storms, and rolled into the felt walls of the ger. One name always comes back to you first: Sorgagtani Beki. She was a niece-in-law of Genghis Khan, and one of the most quietly influential women in the empire. While the men galloped across continents waving banners, She built something stronger: stability, intelligence networks, diplomatic ties. She raised not warriors, but rulers. 4 sons, all Khans, including Kublai, who'd go on to conquer China and set up the Yuan dynasty. You think about her often when you're fixing a saddle or calming a dispute over who left dung cakes in the cooking pot. Because the strength she had wasn't the loud kind. It was the kind that holds things together while nobody's looking. Historians are still trying to piece together how much power these royal women actually wielded. Some say they ruled as regents. Others argue their influence was mostly behind the curtain. But you know how curtains work if you're behind it. You're running the show. You take your tea outside, where the air is dry and clear. Across the pasture, a group of young girls is practicing archery with sticks and imaginary targets. You watch them, remembering when you did the same until your uncle handed you a real bow and told you not to embarrass the goats. You didn't. You sip your tea, thinking of other names. Torregana Khatun, who ran the empire after her husband, Ogeday's death. For 5 whole years, she held power, issued decrees, managed alliances, and ensured that her son's succession was secure. She didn't wear a crown. She didn't need to. She had the seals, the scribes, the silk traders at her beck and call. And there was Mandukai the Wise, a 15th century warrior queen who reunited the Mongol tribes. She rode into battle in armor, with her adopted child, the future Khan, strapped to her back. You once dressed as her for a midsummer celebration, wearing your heaviest boots and the sternest expression you could muster. Your cousin laughed so hard he fell into a water trough. But that story still gets you invited to the best seats at campfires. You walk slowly along the edge of the pasture, fingers trailing through tall grass. The herds are calm. The children are squabbling over a game of goat-bone dice. And your neighbor is trying again to teach her youngest how to thread a needle without tangling it like a sheep in a thorn bush. All of it, the daily movement, the chores, the unspoken diplomacy of making sure nobody's feelings boil over like a forgotten stew. It's your domain. And in your own quiet way, you're running your empire too. Later, you return to your jur and pull out a small box tucked beneath the bedding. Inside, keepsakes, old braids, a chipped bowl, a scrap of silk your grandmother claimed came from Karakoram itself. You also find a folded bit of parchment, a rare gift from a passing merchant. On it, a stylized drawing of Sorghaghtani Beki, her hand raised in benediction, or possibly a warning. Depending on how you squint, you don't need paintings to remember. But still, it's nice. Your daughter wanders in, dragging a broken bridle and asking if it's salvageable. You examine it, nod, and say, "Let's fix it together." And just like that, the legacy continues not in thrones or gold, but in the patient threading of new leather through old wisdom. Together, you sit by the doorway, patching and binding. The wind picks up again, flapping the edge of the felt wall like it's trying to whisper something. You listen, half expecting to hear a queen's voice on the breeze, but no. It's just the goats arguing again. You pause, tighten a knot, and murmur. Mandukai would have fed them to her hawks. Your daughter snorts with laughter, and that's the thing. Your power doesn't wear armor. It wears boots and a shawl and a bone needle tucked into the edge of your sleeve. You command not through edicts, but through knowing when to speak and when to raise an eyebrow. You keep the stories alive. Yes, but more than that. You keep the rhythm of the world moving. You glance again at the sky. The clouds are changing shape, pulling shadows over the grass. A storm might come later. You're ready. Of course, because the queens of the steppe didn't need thrones. They had horses, homes on wheels, and voices strong enough to echo through centuries. Afternoon spills lazily across the grassland, like someone tipped over a bowl of honey. You squint at the light, shielding your eyes with one hand as the wind carries in a smell that can only mean one thing. Someone nearby is cooking something wildly unearned by their culinary reputation. It smells ambitious, but you're not on kitchen duty. Not right now. This is the part of the day carved out for the most sacred of steppe rituals, leisure. Yes, even out here, surrounded by livestock, chores, migrating weather, and the ever-present threat of someone borrowing your best saddle blanket and denying it, you find time to rest. Sort of. You settle onto a low cushion just outside your gyr, a bowl of roasted seeds in your lap, and your favorite set of goat bone dice in your hand. The dice clack gently as you shake them. The sound, oddly satisfying, a dry, hollow clatter like tiny hooves on packed earth. You toss them onto a felt mat. 2 horses and a moon. Excellent. The game is called shagai, and it's as old as your grandmother's sarcasm. Each face of the carved ankle bones represents an animal horse, sheep, goat, or camel. The rules. Well, those depend on who you're playing with, how long it's been since lunch, and whether or not your cousin is feeling dramatic. Your cousin, as it happens, arrives just then with a pouch of his own dice and a deeply suspicious grin. He sits across from you, pours his dice out with a flourish, and claims to be undefeated since last summer. You remind him gently that you beat him so badly during the harvest games he swore off dairy for 3 days. The children gather quickly, drawn by the clatter and the chance to witness someone cry over a dice game. You distribute tiny snacks to keep them from interrupting roasted barley, a shard of dried fruit, and one mysterious seed that may or may not be decorative. The first round begins. It's a game of speed and strategy, of luck and lightly veiled insults. You both race to flick the bones into matching pairs, scooping and sorting, laughing and elbowing when someone accidentally knocks the mat askew. The children cheer, boo, and occasionally declare new rules mid-game. At one point, your cousin claims his dice were cursed by a shaman. You respond by dramatically blessing your own with a chant that involves whistling and a completely made-up dance move. Everyone approves. The goats nearby remain unimpressed. Between rounds, you chat about camp news. Someone's cart broke a wheel and had to be dragged by a particularly moody ox. Someone else tried to dye their deal with berry juice and now looks like a patriotic turnip. You share a rumor about a visiting singer with a voice like thunder and a habit of stealing blankets. The stories float easily in the air, warm and a little ridiculous. This is how news travels on the steppe, not in scrolls, not on parchment, but wrapped in laughter, exaggeration, and the occasional game of dice. Historians sometimes describe steppe leisure as rudimentary. You raise an eyebrow at that. Clearly, they've never seen a grandmother's face during a high-stakes shagai match, or witnessed a full-moon goat bone tournament where the winner gets bragging rights and an entire wheel of cheese. You take a break to sip tea. It's gone lukewarm, but you add a pinch of salt and swirl it like a potion. One of the children plops down beside you with a riddle. What has 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 after dumplings? You blink. Isn't that a version of the old man riddle? The child shrugs. Maybe. But the dumplings make it better. You agree. Later, someone pulls out a small drum made from stretched hide, and a rhythm begins. Not loud, just steady. A background heartbeat to the camp's lazy hour. Another child begins a game of tug of scarf, which ends with both players tangled in wool and declarations of victory from both sides. A teenage girl practices throat singing near her jur, her voice rising in low, resonant tones that sound like the wind waking up. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound buzz through your bones. It's not a lullaby, not exactly, but it still makes your heart slow and your breath stretch long. You think about how these quiet moments are as essential as any migration or ceremony. Leisure isn't a luxury, it's part of the pattern, like stitching, like writing, like letting the fire go low and the tea go cool, just so you can reheat it again. Your cousin wins the last round. Barely. He throws his hands in the air and demands a ceremonial song. You offer a slow clap and a flat expression. The children begin chanting something that rhymes poorly with cheater. The goats shuffle away with great disapproval as the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the felt walls and the scattered bones. You gather the dice, tuck them into their pouch, and stretch with a satisfied groan. Games may be small things, but they hold the world together. One toss, one laugh, one goat-shaped victory at a time. And tomorrow, you'll play again. You rise the next morning to the unmistakable clatter of hooves and the low, musical clink of metal against leather. It's tack-checking day, the semi-regular ritual of inspecting every piece of gear involved in keeping the family and your herds in motion. Saddles, reins, bridles, stirrups, ropes, and all the odd bits in between. It's not glamorous, but you enjoy it. There's something deeply satisfying about making sure everything's in working order, and about reminding certain men in your family where they last misplaced their equipment. Again, you toss on a thick apron, knot your hair in a quick twist, and head out to the gear pile, which is unsurprisingly less a pile and more a chaotic sprawl, currently being used as a nap spot by a very confident cat. You start with the saddles. They're laid out under the eaves of a cart, stitched leather drying in the morning breeze. You run your hands over each one, feeling for worn spots, listening for creaks that suggest trouble. The wood frames are solid, the padding still springy. You smile at the one with decorative felt along the edge. It's not necessary, but a touch of flair never hurt a ride. Your husband arrives about this time, rubbing sleep from his eyes and carrying the world's least helpful bundle of tangled reins. You raise an eyebrow. I found these under the goat cart. Of course you did. He shrugs, like this is the natural order of things, then tries to untangle the reins by shaking them vigorously. You gently take them from him, sit cross-legged, and begin teasing the knots apart one by one. He watches, vaguely embarrassed, as you quietly mutter the name of every single piece of equipment he's ever misplaced. You reach 13 before he pretends to go check the horses. Historians often describe Mongol men as the riders, the warriors, the leaders. They forget who made sure their saddles didn't collapse mid-campaign. They forget who repaired the stirrup leathers after 3 months of chasing herds across frozen plains. They forget who actually knew how to wrap a girth strap without slicing it in half from over-tightening. You, for example, you finish the reins, oil them lightly, and set them aside to dry. Next, you tackle the harnesses, checking buckles, tightening stitching, reinforcing the worn places with strips of hide. Your toolkit is simple awl, bone needle, beeswax, and sheer determination. You hum to yourself as you sew, a tune about a stallion who falls in love with a rain cloud. The kids show up around this time, one leading a sheep that is definitely not a horse, and claiming it needs a saddle just in case. You redirect them to the tack repair scraps and assign them the very serious job of polishing bridle bits. They take it with tremendous solemnity and proceed to polish themselves as well. Next, you gather the family's riding gear into neat piles, your husband's stiff leather saddle with the carved designs, your own more flexible one with extra padding, the children's small wooden saddles still bearing bite marks from that one incident you don't talk about. One stirrup leather is fraying. You cut it away and replace it with a strip you've been saving for just this moment. You even stitch a little pattern into it, nothing fancy, just a curved line and a tiny knot that only you will notice. But it matters, because care lives in those details. Your mother-in-law strolls over to inspect your work. She grunts in approval, which, from her, is basically a standing ovation. Then come the ropes. You stretch them out, coil by coil, checking for dryness, weakness, or damage from overzealous goats. One section needs replacing, so you cut it, splice in a new strand, and knot it so tightly it might survive an earthquake. You test a few knots on your husband. Literally. He offers up his wrist, and you demonstrate 3 different methods to tie a hand that absolutely will not slip, even if you're trying to chase a runaway cow while sneezing. He claims he's not impressed, but his eyes say otherwise. A small group of neighbors passes by, noticing your setup. Someone asks for help with a saddlebag strap. Another wants advice on tightening a girth without pinching. You help them all, methodically, patiently, with a few jokes along the way. It turns into an impromptu gear workshop. One of the women brings over her brother's saddle, which has clearly been trampled by something with hooves and no sense of boundaries. You examine it, whistle low, and say, "Well, I've seen worse. Once. But that involved fire." She laughs, and you begin repairing it together. There's a quiet pride in this kind of work. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't shout. But it holds everything together literally. Without tack and gear that works, horses can't be ridden. Carts can't move. Families can't travel. It's the hidden spine of the nomadic world, and you've got it memorized. Later, you check the horse blankets. You add padding where needed, mend a few tears, and gently brush off the dust. You whisper something to your favorite mare as you drape the blanket across her back. She flicks an ear and leans into your shoulder. You finish the morning with a final once-over. Saddle stacked, reins coiled, stirrups gleaming, and a neat pile of scraps set aside for future emergencies. You wash your hands in a tin basin, wipe them dry on a corner of your apron, and step back with a nod. Your husband tries to help carry the gear back inside, but trips over a sleeping dog and spills half of it. You shake your head, gather the pieces, and tell him sweetly that maybe he should stick to herding for the rest of the day. Because today, like most days, you've managed the repairs, trained the kids, restocked the straps, and quietly saved the migration from unraveling. All before noon, the afternoon heat settles in like a thick, woolen blanket draped across the steppe. The grass, once dancing in the breeze, now lies still, too tired to rustle. You sit on a low stool outside the gyre, sharpening a bone awl with slow, methodical strokes. Around you, the world shifts into its quieter mode. No major tasks, no major chaos. Just the kind of day when you measure time by clouds, not clocks, but the air smells different. You pause, lift your face to the wind, and sniff rain. No, dust. Not quite. Then it hits you. A storm's coming, not the kind that crashes with thunder and horses panicking, but one of those long, sideways moving wind tantrums that rearranges everyone's plans and half your laundry. You look at the horizon. Sure enough, a low, gray ripple is crawling your way, dragging a murky line behind it. It's not moving fast, but it's committed. With a sigh, you call to the kids, point at the clouds, and announce that it's time for storm prep. This is not met with enthusiasm. One declares they were just about to invent a new kind of jump rope. Another clutches a rock like it's a rare heirloom. The third vanishes behind a pile of sheepskins. You direct them calmly, herding them like goats with slightly better vocabulary. Blankets get rolled, food gets tucked into the tightest bundles, and anything lighter than a well-fed chicken is tied down. You head into the gyre to check the felt seams. The top ring your smoke hole gets partially covered with the flap, pulled down and fastened tight. You add extra weights to the door flap and tuck an extra wool mat along the north wall, where the wind always finds its way in. This isn't your first rodeo. Then comes the wool. You sort through the felt pieces and begin laying out your storm layers, thick, durable, a bit rough, but dependable. One is wrapped around the fire pit's base. Another goes under the sleeping mats. You reinforce the edges with smooth stones you keep for this very occasion, their surfaces worn down by years of faithful service. As you work, your hands move without thinking, performing the rituals of weather readiness you learned when you were still too small to walk without tripping over your own deal. You remember your mother's voice saying, "The wind doesn't listen, but it respects preparation." Historians rarely write about this kind of wisdom about wool weight, about which side of the gyre should face the wind during autumn, about how to dry boots near a fire without shrinking them into decorative souvenirs. But you carry it all in your hands. Outside, your husband is tying down the cart covers, muttering something about last year's storm stealing his best hat. You smile at the memory. You found the hat 3 weeks later lodged in a bush, looking like it had developed a personality. You kept it anyway. The wind arrives slowly, brushing at first, then poking, then yanking. The grass waves in chaotic patches. The horses shift their weight and snort. Somewhere behind the gyre, a child yells. It's here, and immediately gets their scarf tangled over their face. You sit on the doorstep, pulling your shawl tight, and watch as the camp collectively hunkers down. The wind whistles, low and constant, curling around corners, rattling bowls, tugging at the strings of the bone dice you forgot to tie down. You sip tea with both hands. It's salty and warm and somehow tastes stronger when there's weather in the air. And then, in the middle of the gusting, something strange happens. You feel peace. It's a kind of storm silence. The moment when everything's in motion, but your thoughts stop twitching. You sit with it, letting your shoulders drop and your breath slow. The world outside rages in its small way, but inside the ger, everything holds. The felt swells, flexes, and whispers against the wind. The roof creaks, but stays firm. You glance around. Everything is exactly where it should be. You check the wool bundles again, smoothing the corners. One corner is damp. You shift it. One of the kids hands you a cup of water as an apology for stepping on your sewing kit. You accept both the water and the apology. A neighbor sticks her head in and asks if you have any spare twine. You hand her a ball and a cookie. She says nothing, but nods like you've just saved her marriage. Later, when the wind dies down, as it always does, you step back outside. The grass is flatter now, the sky smudged but clearing. You untie the door flap, fold it back, and let fresh air swirl inside the jeer like a lazy ghost. The animals are unharmed. The children are tired. And your husband's hat, still attached to his head this time. You gather the wool scraps and hang them in the sun to dry, watching the way the light plays across the fibers. Soft, golden, warm, like the inside of a yawn. You've weathered another storm. Nothing broke, nothing lost. The wool held. The jur stood. And tomorrow, there'll be stories about the great wind of today. Exaggerated, of course, but told with laughter and half a dumpling in someone's mouth, because wisdom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums like felt stretched tight across the sky. Twilight comes in, slow and soft, like an old friend sneaking into camp without saying much. The sky fades from smoky blue to dusky lavender, and the steppe begins to hush. You've spent the day managing storms, fixing tack, and narrowly avoiding becoming the arbitrator in a heated family argument over who stole the last dumpling again. But now the air smells of embers and warm milk. Now comes the best part of the day, the quiet glide into night. You sit near the hearth, coaxing the fire back to life with a few dried twigs and a gentle breath. No rush. The embers still glow from earlier, loyal and lazy. You stack a few dung cakes, hear the familiar crackle, and soon, the warmth curls around the inside of the jeer like a silk ribbon. The children have already begun to settle. 2 are curled under a felt blanket in the corner, whispering the day's secrets to each other with all the subtlety of bellowing oxen. The 3rd has fallen asleep in the most inconvenient spot possible, half across your sleeping mat. Legs wedged under a saddlebag like a piece of oddly shaped furniture. You don't move him. You just step over him and get the tea ready. Tonight's tea is richer, heavier on the butter, less on the salt. You like it this way, when the wind has worked too hard. You pour it into your good bowl, the one with the small crack shaped like a bird's foot, and hold it close. The warmth seeps into your fingers. And knock at the G or flap. Not a real knock, more of a polite cough in wool. It's your neighbor, wrapped in 3 shawls and holding a tiny basket of sweet curds. For no reason, she says. You accept them for no reason, then invite her in. She sits beside you without ceremony. Together, you sip tea and listen to the wind outside. It's quiet now, not silent, but slow. Like it's tired too. You talk a little about the mare that refused to be saddled, about the goat that tried to eat your mother-in-law's sleeve, about the little girl born 2 nights ago who already looks like she knows a secret. Historians might call this informal community building. You just call it tea with someone who gets it. Eventually, she leaves, disappearing into the dark like smoke. You close the flap gently and sit for a moment, staring at the fire. You've lived so many days like this, and each one feels slightly different, like turning the same crystal to catch a new sliver of light. Now, it's time for the last rituals. You stir the coals one final time, coax them into a low, glowing bed. You brush crumbs from the sleeping mats, nudge a few shoes into neater piles, and untangle the corner of the felt rug someone kicked loose during their nap flail. You wrap yourself in a thick wool blanket and lie down, back against the sheepskin, facing the curved wall of the gur. You can hear every sound, the dog outside shifting in his sleep, the mare breathing slow and steady, the youngest child snoring with surprising commitment. Above, the wooden ribs of the gyr reach toward the smoke hole like fingers folded in prayer. A single star peeks through the gap, bold and quiet. You feel your breath slowing, your heartbeat softening. Another day, complete. Another circle, closed. Wind down 300 words. Let it all fade now. The wind has calmed. The fire has gone low, and the weight of the day is no longer something you have to carry. Let your body soften into the warmth beneath you, wool against skin, still air brushing your cheeks, the scent of ember smoke lingering like a lullaby on your clothes. Breathe in through your nose. Feel your chest rise slowly, like the sky swelling just before dawn. Let it fall again, long, slow, quiet. There's no task waiting, no reins to hold, no children asking where their other boot went. You've done enough. You've done more than enough. Outside, the stars are turning overhead, vast and patient, just as they did for the women before you, the queens, the herders, the storytellers. They're all there, in the fire, in the wind, in the stories you carry in your hands and the rhythm of your steps across the grass. The gyr hums gently around you, its felt walls breathing in sync with your own body. The world doesn't need fixing, just resting, just pausing, just drifting. Feel your limbs grow heavy. Feel the day unravel from your shoulders. There is peace here, quiet, strong, and old. You are safe. You are warm. You are home. Now sleep.